The HOA president stood in my driveway wearing a red dress pointing at my oak tree. "That's coming down, Mr. Wheeler," I laughed. Big mistake. 2 weeks later, $750,000 lawsuit. Daily $500 fines. She was destroying me over a tree that existed before her entire HOA. I lost 30 pounds, couldn't sleep. Neighbors turned against me, tires slashed. I stood under that tree at midnight, completely broken. Then I discovered something buried in 1874 documents, a legal loophole she never saw coming. I didn't just save my tree. I planted 1,000 more that blocked the sun from her house forever. Her solar panels, useless. Her property value, destroyed, completely legal. Watch until the end to see the courtroom moment she realized she'd lost everything. Real quick, drop your state in the comments so I can see how far this story's reached across the country. My name is Marcus Wheeler. I'm 38 years old, landscape architect, and I bought what I thought was paradise. 5 acres in Pine Ridge Estates, Colorado, corner lot. Mountain views that make your chest tight. A modest craftsman house that needed work, but I didn't care. I'd spent a decade in cramped apartments, listening to neighbors through paper-thin walls, dreaming of space, of land, of something that was mine. The property had one feature that sealed the deal, an oak tree, massive, ancient. The realtor said it was over 150 years old. Trunk so thick 3 men couldn't wrap their arms around it, branches spreading like a cathedral ceiling. I stood under that tree the day I signed the papers, touched the rough bark, and felt my grandfather's presence. He'd taught me everything about trees, about land, about how a man takes care of what's his. I spent my first month renovating, ripping out old carpet, sanding floors, installing new windows. Every morning I'd wake up at sunrise, make coffee, sit on the porch, watch deer graze near the tree line, listen to the wind move through pine branches, feel the mountain air fill my lungs. This was America, real America, the kind my grandfather fought for. The neighborhood seemed perfect. Quiet streets, families, kids riding bikes. American flags on porches. People waved when they drove past. I thought I'd found home, then I noticed her, mid-50s, blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, always perfectly styled. Designer clothes, pearl necklaces. She drove a white Mercedes that gleamed like it was polished daily. Walked a small dog past my property every morning. Same time, same route, but she never waved, she stared, at my house, at my truck, at my oak tree. Her name was Victoria Ashford, HOA president. I learned this from my neighbor, an elderly man named Robert who lived 3 houses down. He mentioned it casually while I was checking my mailbox. "That's Victoria," he said, voice quiet. "Been running the HOA for 15 years, keeps everything orderly." Something in his tone made me look at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Orderly?" I asked, just. "Keep your lawn mowed, Marcus. Keep things clean, you'll be fine." He walked away quickly. I didn't think much of it. I kept my property maintained, mowed regularly, trimmed hedges, fixed the fence. I was a good neighbor, a good citizen. 3 weeks after moving in, Victoria stopped in front of my house during her morning walk. I was on the porch drinking coffee. She stood at the property line looking up at the oak tree. Her dog pulled at the leash. She didn't move. I set down my coffee, walked to the edge of the porch. "Morning," I called out. She turned slowly, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Wheeler," she said, voice sharp, precise. "I'm Victoria Ashford, HOA president. Welcome to Pine Ridge Estates." "Thanks, beautiful neighborhood." She looked back at the oak tree, studied it like she was calculating something. "That tree," she said, pointing with one manicured finger. "It's going to be a problem." My chest tightened. "Problem? Aesthetic concerns, maintenance issues, I'll be in touch." She walked away, heels clicking on pavement, dog trotting beside her. I stood there holding my coffee mug, watching her disappear around the corner. The morning suddenly felt colder. 14 days later, the letter arrived, certified mail. I had to sign for it. The postal worker handed me the thick envelope, and I felt weight that had nothing to do with paper. I stood in my driveway, mountain sun beating down, and opened it. Notice of violation. My hands started shaking. The letter was typed on official HOA letterhead, legal language, cold, clinical. It stated that my oak tree violated Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association Code 7.32, Aesthetic Uniformity Standards and Landscape Compliance Regulations. I read it 3 times. They were claiming my tree, a tree that existed before their neighborhood, before their HOA, before any of this, violated their aesthetic standards. The demand was simple: remove the tree within 30 days or face fines of $500 per day until compliance is achieved. $500 every single day. I called the HOA office immediately, got voicemail. Left a message, no callback. I called again the next day and the next. Finally, on day 4, a secretary answered. She sounded bored. "I need to speak with Victoria Ashford," I said. "Regarding the violation notice about my oak tree. This is insane. The tree was here before, Mr. Wheeler. If you'd like to contest the violation, you need to request an emergency board meeting. I can schedule that for 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks, the letter says I have 30 days to remove the tree, or those are the procedures, Mr. Wheeler. Would you like me to schedule the meeting or not? I scheduled it. Those 3 weeks felt like 3 years. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. I kept walking outside, looking at that oak tree, trying to understand how this was happening. I researched everything, found the original property survey, found historical county records, found arborist reports proving the tree was healthy, structurally sound, and over 150 years old. Found documentation showing it existed long before Pine Ridge Estates was developed. I had evidence, facts, logic. I thought that would matter. The emergency meeting was held in the community center conference room, fluorescent lights, folding chairs, cheap paneling on the walls. Victoria sat at the head of the table wearing a bright pink blazer dress. Hair perfect, makeup flawless. Two other board members flanked her, a thin man in his 60s who kept adjusting his glasses and a heavy-set woman who stared at her phone the entire time. I sat across from them, my folder of documents in front of me, my heart hammering. Mr. Wheeler, Victoria said, smiling that cold smile. Thank you for coming. You have 15 minutes to present your case. I stood. Laid out everything, the historical surveys, the arborist reports. The county records proving the tree predated their authority by over a century. I spoke clearly, calmly, presented facts. Victoria listened without expression. When I finished, she folded her hands on the table. Mr. Wheeler, we appreciate your research, but the reality is simple. Your tree creates shade that affects Mrs. Morrison's solar panels next door. It drops leaves on Mr. Hartford's lawn 3 houses down. Root systems can damage underground utilities. Most importantly, it disrupts the uniform aesthetic vision we've worked 15 years to maintain in this community. But the tree was here first, I said. Before any of this, before the HOA, we don't care about history, Mr. Wheeler. The room went silent. We care about property values, we care about uniformity, we care about maintaining standards. Your tree is a liability and an eyesore. The board votes now. The thin man raised his hand. The heavy woman raised hers without looking up from her phone. 3-0, Victoria said. The violation stands. You have 16 days remaining. Cut down the tree or face daily fines. This meeting is adjourned. I walked out of that room understanding something fundamental. This wasn't about a tree. This was about power. And Victoria Ashford needed me to know she had all of it. Day 31 arrived like a death sentence. I didn't cut down the tree. Another certified letter, $500 fine assessed. Payment due within 10 days. Day 32. Another $500. Day 33, another $500. I couldn't breathe. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., do the math in my head. 500 times 30 times 60 times 90. The numbers became surreal, impossible. I hired a lawyer, cost me $5,000 just for the retainer. Young guy, mid-30s, worked out of a strip mall office. He reviewed the HOA covenants, the violation notice, everything. 3 days later, he called me with news that made my stomach drop. Marcus, I'm not going to lie to you, this is bad. I was standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring out the window at the oak tree. How bad? The HOA rules were deliberately written with vague language. Aesthetic uniformity standards can mean basically anything the board decides it means. And worse, they have legal authority to place liens on your property for unpaid fines. Liens, if you don't pay, they can force a sale of your house to collect. The room tilted. That's legal? Unfortunately, yes. HOAs have broad powers in Colorado. You signed the covenants when you bought the property. I'd signed them, barely read them, nobody reads them. You buy a house, you sign papers, you trust the system. The fines kept coming. $500 per day, like clockwork, certified letters arriving regularly, each one another knife wound. By week 3, I'd accumulated $10,500 in fines. I paid them, maxed out a credit card, had no choice. If I didn't pay, they'd put a lien on my house, could force foreclosure. By week 6, $21,000. My savings account emptied. I stopped going out, stopped seeing friends, stopped everything except work and worry. I tried talking to neighbors, knocked on doors, explained the situation. Asked if anyone else had dealt with Victoria's harassment. Most wouldn't open their doors. Those who did spoke in whispers, eyes darting around like she might be listening. One man, Robert, the elderly neighbor who'd warned me early on, finally pulled me aside at the mailbox. Marcus, you need to stop fighting this, he whispered. I can't just… The Hendersons, 2 years ago, nice family, 3 kids. Victoria decided their fence was the wrong shade of white, fined them into foreclosure. They lost everything, had to move to Wyoming to live with family. That's insane. That's Victoria. She destroyed them because they questioned her authority. You're doing worse than questioning, you're defying her outright. He walked away quickly, looking over his shoulder. That night I couldn't sleep, sat on my porch at 2 a.m. staring at the oak tree in moonlight, branches swaying. Leaves rustling, beautiful, peaceful, completely unaware it was costing me everything. By month 3, the fines reached $45,000. I'd taken out a home equity loan, borrowed money from my sister, sold my truck and bought a beat-up Honda, cut every expense, stopped eating out, survived on rice and beans. I was losing weight, hair falling out in the shower, couldn't concentrate on work projects. Clients started complaining. My reputation suffering. Then Victoria escalated. A new letter arrived, not a fine notice, a lawsuit. She was suing me personally for $750,000 in damages, claiming the tree constituted a public nuisance that had diminished property values for surrounding homes, demanding not just removal but financial compensation for alleged losses. My lawyer called an hour after I received it. Marcus, if we lose this case, you lose everything, your house, your land. You could be paying this off for the rest of your life. You might even face jail time for contempt if you continue refusing to remove the tree. I sat down on my kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, phone in my hand, staring at nothing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be America. This couldn't be how justice worked, but it was, and I was drowning. 6 months of hell. That's what the legal battle became, pure hell. Depositions where Victoria's lawyers treated me like a criminal, court appearances that drained my bank account, motions, counter-motions, paperwork that never ended. My lawyer bills exceeded $80,000 I'd borrowed from everyone. Maxed out every credit card, took out predatory loans with interest rates that should be illegal. I lost 30 pounds. My face looked gaunt in the mirror, dark circles under my eyes. I wasn't sleeping more than 2 or 3 hours a night. Work dried up. Word spread that I was difficult, that I was involved in legal troubles. Clients canceled contracts. New projects disappeared. The neighborhood turned completely against me. Victoria had poisoned them. I'd hear whispers at the mailbox. He's hurting our property values. He's selfish. Why doesn't he just cut down the stupid tree? Kids threw eggs at my house. Someone spray-painted tree hugger on my driveway. My car windows got smashed twice. Police did nothing. HOA disputes are civil matters, sir. I was completely isolated. No friends, no support. Just me and that oak tree and the crushing weight of legal destruction. The worst moment came on a Tuesday evening in October. Sun setting behind the mountains, golden light filtering through branches. I stood in my yard, chainsaw in my hands. I'd bought it that morning. Just stood there staring at the tree trunk, seriously considering surrender. Just cut it down, just give her what she wants. End this nightmare. I was crying. Actually crying, touching the rough bark. Remembering my grandfather's voice, a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything, Marcus, remember that. But I was so tired, so broken, so utterly destroyed, I dropped the chainsaw. Sat down in the grass, put my head in my hands. That's when my phone rang. My lawyer, Marcus, we need to talk. His voice sounded wrong, strained. What is it? The judge, he's leaning Victoria's side. The trial is in 2 weeks. If we lose, it's not just the $750,000. You could face additional penalties, court costs. And if you still refuse to remove the tree after a court order, you could face contempt charges. That means jail time. The world stopped. Jail? It's rare but possible. Marcus, I need you to seriously consider settling. She might agree to drop the financial damages if you just remove the tree. It's not too late to. I hung up, sat there in the grass as darkness fell, completely defeated. That night I couldn't go inside, couldn't face the empty house. I stayed outside, sitting under the oak tree, wrapped in a blanket, staring at stars. Thought about my grandfather, about the land he'd worked with his hands, about the dignity he'd taught me, about standing for something even when it costs everything. Around midnight, I went inside to get water. The property survey documents were scattered across my kitchen table. I'd reviewed them 1,000 times, looking for anything, any loophole, any way out, but I'd found nothing. I picked up one of the older surveys. From 1874, original land grant documentation. I'd looked at it before, but never closely, never with desperate eyes. And there, in tiny handwriting in the margin, was a notation I'd missed. Survey marker established oak any corner conservation easement per territorial grant. My heart stopped. Conservation easement. I grabbed my laptop, started searching territorial land grants, conservation easements. Original homestead laws, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., coffee, more research, county records database, historical documents, there it was, buried in paperwork from 1874. My property was part of an original homestead land grant. The oak tree marked a specific survey corner, and the original deed contained a conservation easement, a legal protection ensuring natural features remained undisturbed. This easement was never terminated. It was still legally binding. Victoria had no authority over my tree. None, never did. My hands were shaking. I kept digging. Found the HOA's founding documents from 1998. Read through every page. Appendix C clause buried deep. Association has no authority over pre-existing natural landmarks or historically significant vegetation predating community development. She either didn't know about this, or she gambled I'd never find it. But I found it and I wasn't done. I pulled Victoria's property records, her deed, her construction permits. Her house sat on what used to be wetlands, filled in 2003. I found the environmental survey, no permits. Illegal filling, I finally had her. I didn't sleep for 72 hours, just coffee, documents, county records office during the day, online databases at night. My kitchen table became a war room, papers everywhere, highlighted passages, post-it notes. Legal pads filled with connections. I was pulling records from the 1870s. Original surveyor maps, territorial land patents, homestead claims, every document related to my property's history. The county records clerk, a woman in her 60s named Dorothy, started recognizing me. Back again, Mr. Wheeler. Need everything on land grant 1874 HC-847. She'd disappear into the archives. Return with dusty boxes. I'd spend hours photographing every page. The conservation easement was real, rock solid. The original homestead patent specifically protected natural landmarks including established trees marking survey corners. Legal language from 1874 that still carried weight in 2024. But I needed more than defense, I needed ammunition. I pulled every founding document for Pine Ridge Estates HOA, read through incorporation papers, bylaws, amendments, looked for weaknesses, found them. The HOA's own documents, filed in 1998, explicitly stated, "This association acknowledges and respects all pre-existing legal easements, conservation protections, and historical landmarks. Authority of this board does not supersede federal, state, or historically established land protections." They'd written their own loophole, probably never thought anyone would use it against them. Victoria either didn't know this clause existed, or she'd been president so long she'd forgotten. Power makes you sloppy. But the real prize came on hour 68 of my research marathon. I was pulling property records for board members, looking for anything useful, any violations they'd committed, any hypocrisy I could expose. Victoria's property deed, 2847 Meadowbrook Lane. I pulled the original environmental survey from when the land was sold in 2001. Designated wetlands, protected habitat, development restricted. Then I pulled her construction permits from 2003 when she built her house. She'd filled the wetlands, brought in truckloads of dirt, leveled everything, built her house on top. I pulled the permit applications. She'd applied for wetland mitigation. Application denied by the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. She built anyway, no proper permits, no mitigation, just filled protected wetlands and constructed her house. That's a federal environmental violation, EPA jurisdiction, criminal penalties possible. My hands were shaking as I photographed every document. I had her property history, her violation, her illegal construction, but I still needed a strategy, a plan. A way to not just defend myself but destroy her ability to hurt anyone ever again. I sat at my kitchen table, exhausted, wired on coffee, staring at my oak tree through the window. Then it hit me. What if I didn't just save my tree? What if I made it impossible for Victoria to ever threaten anyone's trees again? I started sketching. Property boundaries, environmental designations, conservation easements, my 5 acres. What if I turned the entire property into protected conservation land? I researched Colorado conservation programs. Found the Division of Wildlife offers official conservation status for properties that serve as wildlife habitat. Requirements documented native species, migratory patterns, ecological significance. I could do that. I called a botanist that morning. Dr. Sarah Mitchell explained what I needed. You want a comprehensive ecological survey? Everything, every plant, every species, every migratory pattern, every reason my land deserves protection. That's expensive, Marcus. I don't care. How fast can you do it? 2 weeks. Do it. I called an environmental consultant next, then a wildlife specialist, built a team, but the most important call was to my lawyer. I found something, I said. Marcus, the trial is in 10 days, unless this is conservation easement from 1874 still legally binding. The HOA has no authority, never did, and I found something else. Victoria's house is built on illegally filled wetlands, federal violation, silence on the other end. Are you certain? I have documentation, everything. Marcus, this changes everything. This isn't defense anymore. This is offense. Good, because I'm done defending, time to attack. Trial day arrived like a storm. I woke at 5 a.m., showered, put on my only suit, 10 years old, tight in the shoulders now that I'd lost so much weight. Looked at myself in the mirror. Hollow eyes, sharp cheekbones, but something else too, determination. I loaded my banker's box into my beat-up Honda, documents organized, evidence labeled, strategy mapped. My lawyer met me outside the courthouse. Mountain sun blazing, cold October air. You ready? He asked. Let's end this. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors filled the gallery. I recognized faces, people who'd thrown eggs at my house, who'd whispered about me, who'd turned their backs. And there was Victoria, front row, plaintiff's side, wearing a crimson-red dress. Blonde bob perfect, pearl necklace. She sat flanked by three lawyers in expensive suits. They had matching leather briefcases, matching confidence. She saw me walk in, smiled, that cold, triumphant smile. She whispered something to her lead attorney. They both laughed, looking at me. At my single lawyer, at my cardboard box of documents, she thought she'd already won. The judge entered, Honorable Robert Cunningham, late 60s, gray hair, stern face. He'd been on the bench for 30 years. Case number 2024 CV-8847, Ashford versus Wheeler, will hear opening statements. Victoria's lead attorney stood, tall man, silver hair, voice like polished stone. He presented their case, showed blown-up photos of my oak tree, called it an environmental hazard, showed shadow analysis, ridiculous graphs claiming the tree reduced sunlight to neighboring properties, showed photographs of leaves on lawns. Actual photographs of leaves, like leaves, were criminal evidence. He brought up property values, claimed my stubborn refusal to comply with reasonable community standards had damaged surrounding home prices by an estimated $750,000 collectively. He painted me as selfish, unreasonable, a man who cared more about a tree than his neighbor's well-being. Victoria nodded along, dabbed her eyes with a tissue during the emotional parts. Performance worthy of an Oscar. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, cleared his throat. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that this entire case is built on fraudulent authority. Victoria's smile disappeared. Her lawyers exchanged glances. We started with the conservation easement. My lawyer walked the judge through the 1874 Homestead Grant, the survey markers, the legal protection for natural landmarks. This oak tree has been legally protected for 150 years, Your Honor. The HOA has no authority over it. Never did. We showed the HOA's own founding documents. Appendix C, the clause they'd written themselves acknowledging they had no power over pre-existing landmarks. The judge was actually reading. Leaning forward, engaged, Victoria leaned over to her lawyers, urgent whispers. They were flipping through documents, scrambling, but we weren't done. My lawyer called me to the stand. I sat in the witness box. Looked at Victoria. She stared back, eyes hard. My lawyer asked me to describe the harassment, the fines, the escalation. I testified about the $127,000 in fines I'd paid, the threatening letters, the isolation, the spray-painted driveway, the smashed windows, the complete destruction of my life over a tree that Victoria had no legal right to touch. I showed photos, documentation, everything. Robert, the elderly neighbor, testified next, told the story of the Hendersons, the family destroyed over a fence color. More neighbors came forward, stories of Victoria's abuse, excessive fines, intimidation tactics, years of tyranny. Victoria's face turned red. She was whispering urgently to her lawyers, getting louder. The judge glanced at her. Then my lawyer dropped the bomb. Your Honor, we'd like to present additional evidence regarding Mrs. Ashford's own property violations. Victoria's eyes went wide. We presented the environmental survey, the wetland documentation, the denied permits, the illegal construction. Her jaw actually dropped. Silence in the courtroom. You could hear breathing. Mrs. Ashford built her home on illegally filled wetlands, my lawyer said. Federal violation, and she spent 15 years harassing my client over a legally protected tree. Victoria stood up. Your Honor, this is— Sit down, Mrs. Ashford. She sat. The judge's expression had changed. He was angry now. Court recessed for lunch, but I knew we'd won. Court recessed at noon. I walked into the marble hallway. Cold air. Footsteps echoing, my heart still pounding from testimony. Then I heard her heels. Click, 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 sharp, precise, fast. I turned. Victoria was storming toward me, face scarlet. Blonde hair slightly disheveled for the first time ever. Eyes blazing with pure rage. She got right in my face, close enough I could see her makeup cracking, could smell her expensive perfume mixed with sweat and fury. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed, voice shaking. Hands trembling at her sides. I stood my ground, didn't move, didn't blink. I know exactly what I've done, Victoria. I've exposed you. I will destroy you, spit flying now, completely unhinged. I will take everything, your house, your business, your reputation. I will make sure you never work in this state again. I will. You already tried that. You failed. She laughed, high-pitched, broken. That tree is coming down even if I have to cut it myself. Even if I have to burn your entire property to the ground. Even if you'll what? Break more laws, commit more fraud. Her hand raised, actually raised like she might hit me. Her lawyers grabbed her arms, pulled her back. But she was screaming now, not whispering, full volume in the courthouse hallway. Who do you think you are? I've run this neighborhood for 15 years. I decide what happens, me. Not some nobody landscaper with delusions of, your property is built on illegally filled wetlands, Victoria. The EPA is very interested in that 2003 construction. Federal agents, criminal charges. Prison time. She went pale, dead silent. The transformation was instant, rage to terror in one heartbeat. She realized I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't empty threats. I had everything, documentation, evidence, proof. Her lawyers were pulling her away now. Urgent voices. Victoria, stop talking, not another word. But I heard her shouting from down the hall, voice echoing off marble walls. This isn't over. This isn't over, my lawyer appeared beside me. Marcus, that was stupid, reckless. I was going to say perfect. The judge saw everything, her losing control like that, it's over, we won. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because I knew women like Victoria. Power addicts, control freaks, they don't accept defeat, they escalate. That afternoon, court reconvened. Victoria sat rigid in her chair, wearing fresh makeup, hair fixed, but her hands shook. Small tremors she couldn't hide. The judge spoke. I've reviewed all evidence presented. This court finds that the HOA acted beyond its legal authority. The conservation easement from 1874 is valid and binding. Mr. Wheeler has no obligation to remove the tree in question. Victoria closed her eyes. Furthermore, the pattern of harassment and excessive fines constitutes abuse of power. The $750,000 lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Her lawyer touched her shoulder. She shrugged him off. The HOA must refund all fines paid by Mr. Wheeler, totaling $127,000 plus legal fees of $83,500. I felt my chest release. Pressure I'd been carrying for 6 months finally lifting. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, this court is referring evidence of environmental code violations on the property at 2847 Meadowbrook Lane to the Colorado Department of Natural Resources and the Environmental Protection Agency for investigation. Victoria stood up. Shaking, Your Honor, this is. Sit down, Mrs. Ashford, she sat. If any further harassment or retaliation occurs against Mr. Wheeler, this court will consider criminal charges including stalking, intimidation, and abuse of authority. Do you understand? Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face now, mascara running, the perfect facade completely shattered. This court is adjourned. I walked out of that courthouse into Colorado October sunshine, cold air. Blue sky, mountains in the distance, felt 20 pounds lighter. Robert was waiting outside, the elderly neighbor, tears in his eyes. He hugged me, actually hugged me. You did it, he whispered. You actually beat her. Other neighbors approached. People who'd avoided me for months. Apologizing, thanking me, shaking my hand, but I wasn't thinking about victory. I was thinking about what comes next, because Victoria's final words echoed in my head. This isn't over, and I believed her. 3 days after the trial, the official court order arrived. I stood in my kitchen holding the document, legal language, official seal, but the meaning was clear, complete victory. The HOA had to refund every penny, $127,000 in fines, $83,500 in legal fees. Total, $210,500. The check arrived within a week, certified mail. I stared at it for a full minute before depositing it into my account, but money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was in the community. Word spread through Pine Ridge estates like wildfire. Marcus Wheeler beat Victoria Ashford, the impossible happened, the tyrant lost. My phone started ringing, neighbors I'd never spoken to, asking questions, sharing stories. Victoria fined us $8,000 for a garden gnome. She made us repaint our house 3 times, cost us $15,000. She threatened foreclosure because our teenager's car was parked incorrectly. 15 years of abuse. Dozens of families, hundreds of thousands of dollars in excessive fines. I started documenting everything. Built a spreadsheet, names, amounts, violations. The pattern was clear. Victoria targeted anyone who questioned her. Anyone who showed independence. Anyone who threatened her control. She was a predator, and the HOA rules were her weapon. I called a community meeting. Sent emails to every resident, posted flyers at the mailboxes. Emergency community discussion, HOA reform, Tuesday 7 p.m. Marcus Wheeler's property. I didn't know if anyone would come. Tuesday evening arrived. I set up folding chairs in my yard under the oak tree. The tree that started everything. 6:45 p.m., still empty, 6:50 p.m. One car pulled up, Robert and his wife, then another car, the Martinez family, then 5 more, 10 more, 20 more. By 7 p.m. my entire yard was packed. 40 families, maybe more people standing, sitting on the grass, leaning against trees. I stood on my porch, looked at all these faces, started talking. Victoria Ashford spent 15 years controlling this neighborhood through fear, through excessive fines, through legal intimidation. She made us believe we were powerless, that we had to accept her tyranny or lose our homes. Heads nodding. People wiping tears. But we're not powerless, we have rights, we have legal options, and together we can take back our neighborhood. Robert stood. I've lived here 12 years, watched Victoria destroy good families, the Hendersons, the Coopers. The Yamadas all gone, foreclosed or forced to sell. I stayed silent because I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. Others started speaking, sharing stories. The yard became a confessional. Years of suppressed anger finally released. We organized right there, created a coalition, drafted a petition demanding an emergency HOA board election to recall Victoria and her loyalist board members. Colorado HOA law requires 40% of homeowners to sign for a recall vote. We got 73%. Signatures on clipboards passed hand to hand, people practically running to sign. Victoria fought it. Sent threatening letters, tried to invalidate signatures on technicalities. Hired lawyers to block the election, didn't matter. The county election board reviewed everything, found the petition valid. Recall vote scheduled for Saturday, November 12th. Community Center, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That Saturday morning felt like election day for president. Cars lined up, families walking together. I'd never seen civic engagement like this. Victoria was there, standing outside the community center, handing out flyers. Vote no on recall, wearing a pale pink dress. Hair perfect again, trying to smile, trying to seem reasonable. Nobody took her flyers. People walked past her like she was invisible. Polls closed at 5 p.m. Votes counted by 6 p.m. The results weren't even close. Recall approved, 87% to 13%. Victoria Ashford removed from the HOA board effective immediately. Her two loyalist board members resigned that night rather than face their own recalls. We held emergency elections the following week. New board, new leadership. Robert became president. A retired lawyer named Susan became treasurer. A school teacher named Mike became secretary. Good people, honest people, people who understood leadership is service, not power, first order of business. Comprehensive HOA reform. They capped all fines at $50 maximum, required full board approval for any lawsuit. Eliminated the vague, aesthetic uniformity clause that gave Victoria unlimited authority. They refunded over $200,000 to families Victoria had persecuted over the years. The neighborhood transformed overnight. Families planted gardens. Kids drew chalk art on sidewalks. American flags flew. It felt like freedom, like America again. But I wasn't done. Winning in court was justice. Removing Victoria was community healing. But I wanted something more permanent. I wanted to make sure no future HOA president could ever abuse power like this again. And I wanted Victoria to understand, truly understand, that actions have consequences. I spent the next month implementing Phase 2. Remember those 5 acres, that land Victoria wanted to control so badly? I hired specialists. A botanist named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an environmental consultant named James Park, a wildlife biologist from Colorado State University. They spent weeks surveying my property, every plant, every species, every migratory pattern. The results were remarkable. My land contained 3 protected plant species, served as a seasonal migratory corridor for elk and mule deer, had nesting sites for 2 raptor species. With this documentation, I applied for official conservation status through the Colorado Division of Wildlife. The application was approved in 6 weeks. My property became legally designated conservation land. This meant several things. First, ironclad legal protection. No HOA, no government agency, no future board could ever threaten my trees again. Federal and state environmental laws now protected every square foot. Second, tax benefits. Conservation land receives significant tax breaks. I'd save thousands annually. Third, grant eligibility. I qualified for environmental restoration grants, funding to expand and improve the habitat. But the fourth benefit, that was personal. Conservation status required me to maintain and expand natural habitat, so I planted trees, lots of trees. I used grant money to purchase 200 native saplings, cottonwoods, aspens, blue spruces, ponderosa pines, and I planted them very strategically, along my property line, the side facing Victoria's house, the side facing the other former board members' homes, every tree positioned for maximum impact. Maximum shade, maximum long-term growth. I worked with a landscape architect to map sun angles, shadow projection, growth patterns over 5, 10, 20 years. The trees were spaced perfectly. Close enough to create a continuous canopy when mature, far enough to ensure healthy growth. All native species, all protected under my conservation status, all completely legal, all permanent. Victoria's house sat on the adjacent lot. Her backyard faced my property line. She had solar panels, expensive installation, probably cost $40,000. Her pool got southern exposure, perfect for Colorado sunshine. Not anymore. Within 6 months, those saplings would grow to 8 feet. Within a year, 12 feet. Within 3 years, they'd form a solid wall of branches and leaves, blocking the afternoon sun completely. Her solar panels would generate almost nothing. Her pool would be in perpetual shade. Her perfect backyard would become a cold, dark space, and her property value would plummet. Everything she'd claimed my oak tree would do to her neighbors, I was now doing to her. But legally, permanently, unstoppably, environmental conservation, wildlife habitat, protected species, she couldn't touch it, nobody could. I planted those trees myself, dug every hole, positioned every sapling, watered each one, my hands blistered, back aching, but every shovel of dirt felt like justice. Robert came over one afternoon while I was planting, watched me work. "Marcus, what are you doing?" I leaned on my shovel, looked at the rows of young trees. "Creating consequences," he smiled, understood immediately. "How many trees?" 200 along this property line. Another 300 across the rest of the acreage, eventually 1,000 total. Victoria's going to lose her mind. Victoria's going to lose her sunlight, there's a difference. He helped me plant the rest that day, didn't say much. Just worked beside me. 2 weeks later, Victoria noticed. I was watering the new saplings when I saw her, standing at her property line, staring at the rows of young trees. She looked older, gray roots showing in her blonde hair. Face thinner, no designer clothes, just jeans and a sweatshirt. Our eyes met across the fence. She didn't say anything, just stared at the trees, understanding dawning in her expression, understanding what I'd done, what she couldn't stop. She turned and walked back to her house. I kept watering. 6 months after the trial, Pine Ridge Estates was unrecognizable, not physically. The houses looked the same, streets the same, mountains the same, but the feeling completely different. Freedom, that's what it felt like. Gardens appeared everywhere. Vegetable plots, flower beds, raised planters, things Victoria had forbidden for aesthetic reasons. The Martinez family planted tomatoes and peppers. Their kids helped weed every evening, learning about growing food, about self-sufficiency. The Johnsons painted their shutters, not HOA-approved beige, actual colors, blue, green, their choice. Kids drew chalk art on sidewalks. Hopscotch squares, rainbows, hearts. Nobody washed it away, nobody fined their parents. Someone organized a neighborhood barbecue, first one in a decade. Families brought food, kids played, adults talked without fear. I stood at that barbecue holding a paper plate, watching children run through sprinklers. This is what community should be, but the transformation went deeper than gardens and barbecues. People started organizing. Real organizing. Robert, as new HOA president, opened every board meeting to resident comments, required transparent voting, published meeting minutes online. Susan, the treasurer, created a public budget spreadsheet. Every dollar accounted for, no more mysterious administrative expenses. Mike, the secretary, started a neighborhood newsletter. Actual news, not propaganda, just information about upcoming votes, maintenance schedules, community events. The HOA became what it should have been all along, a service organization, not an enforcement regime. Fines dropped 95%. The few that were issued were reasonable. $25 for blocking the mailbox. $30 for leaving trash cans out too long. Small reminders, not financial weapons. Property values actually increased. Turns out people want to live in neighborhoods where they're trusted, where they have freedom. Where power doesn't corrupt. Real estate agents started marketing Pine Ridge Estates differently. Community-first neighborhood. Resident-friendly HOA. Freedom with responsibility. New families moved in specifically because of our reputation. But the most important transformation, the people. I'd see neighbors at the mailbox. They'd stop, talk, really talk, not gossip, not complaints, just human connection. "How's your daughter's soccer team? Did you see that sunset last night? Need any help with that deck you're building?" We'd lost that for 15 years. Victoria had poisoned it, created suspicion, fear, isolation. Now we were remembering how to be neighbors again. One evening in April, Robert knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" We sat on my porch, the oak tree above us. New leaves, bright green, evening light filtering through branches. "Wanted to thank you," he said. "You already thanked me 100 times. Not for beating Victoria, for showing us we could fight back. I lived here 12 years, Marcus, watched her destroy good people, and I did nothing. I was afraid. Ashamed of that fear, but afraid nonetheless. You testified at the trial. That took courage. Only after you'd already done the hard part. You stood alone when nobody else would. You risked everything. Lost everything almost." I looked at the oak tree, remembered standing here with a chainsaw, ready to surrender. I just didn't want to cut down my grandfather's tree. "It was never about the tree, you know that," I nodded. "It was about whether one person standing up can make a difference, whether good people can still win. You proved they can. The neighborhood needed to see that. I needed to see that." We sat in silence, listening to wind in the branches. Birds calling, kids laughing somewhere down the street. This was worth it, every dollar, every sleepless night, every moment of fear and pain, because freedom is always worth fighting for. Even when the tyrant wears pearl necklaces and lives next door, even when the battlefield is a suburban yard, even when the weapon is a tree, 1 year after planting. I stood in my yard on an October morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over my property. The 200 trees along Victoria's property line had grown beyond my wildest expectations, 12 to 15 feet tall now. Thick trunks, full branches, dense foliage creating a continuous wall of green. The cottonwoods were fastest, aspens right behind, blue spruces filling gaps, ponderosas establishing deep roots, exactly as planned. I walked the property line inspecting each tree, healthy, strong, protected by state and federal law. Then I looked through the branches toward Victoria's house. Her backyard was in complete shadow. Morning sun hit the eastern side for maybe an hour, then my trees took over. By noon, her entire yard was dark, pool cold, grass struggling, solar panels generating almost nothing. I saw her sometimes, through gaps in the branches. Standing in her backyard, staring at the trees, she'd aged dramatically. The blonde hair now mostly gray, face lined, thinner. She wore simple clothes now, no designer dresses, no pearls. No Mercedes anymore. I'd heard she sold it to pay legal fees and EPA fines. The environmental investigation had been brutal. Federal violations for the illegal wetland filling, state penalties, remediation requirements. She'd paid over $200,000 in fines and mitigation costs. Her house value dropped 30%. Nobody wants to buy property with environmental violations on record or a backyard in permanent shade. She was broken financially, socially, spiritually. Part of me felt satisfaction. She'd tried to destroy me, lost everything trying. Part of me felt something else, not quite pity. Maybe recognition that absolute power corrupts absolutely, that she'd imprisoned herself long before the law caught up. But mostly I felt relieved. She couldn't hurt anyone anymore. That spring, I expanded the project. Applied for additional grant funding. Received $85,000 from the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Fund. Planted 500 more trees across my 5 acres. Created hiking trails. Installed educational signage about native ecosystems. Built birdhouses and bat boxes. My property became a registered wildlife sanctuary. Local schools started bringing students for nature education. Kids learning about trees, wildlife conservation, teachers thanking me for creating this resource. The local paper ran a feature story, Landscape Architect Turns HOA Battle into Environmental Victory. Then regional news picked it up. Colorado Public Radio, Denver news stations. Then a national environmental magazine, How One Man's Property Rights Fight Became a Conservation Win. Interview requests came flooding in, environmental groups. Property rights organizations, HOA reform advocates. I did some, declined others. I wasn't trying to be famous, just wanted to protect my land. But the attention had an unexpected benefit. Other HOA victims started contacting me, people from across the country, sharing their stories, asking advice. HOA threatening foreclosure over my fence color. Fined $40,000 for unauthorized landscaping. Board president targeting me with frivolous violations. I helped when I could. Shared my legal strategy. Explained conservation easements. Connected people with property rights lawyers. Became accidental advocate for HOA reform. Never intended that, just wanted to save one tree. But sometimes one stand inspires others. One victory shows possibility. One person refusing to surrender gives others courage to fight. My 5 acres became 15. Purchased adjacent land when it came available. Expanded the sanctuary. More trails, more habitat, more protection. Over 1,000 trees now standing where Victoria demanded conformity and control. Every morning I walked those trails, watched deer graze, listened to birds. Touched the bark of my grandfather's oak tree, the one that started everything, and I remembered his words. A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. I stood for something, and I'm still standing 5 years later. Today I'm standing at the entrance to what's now officially called the Wheeler Conservation Sanctuary. 15 acres of protected wilderness, inside a suburban neighborhood, completely legal, completely permanent. The sign at the entrance reads, Public Wildlife Sanctuary, open dawn to dusk, free admission. Over 1,000 trees now stand on this land. The original oak, my grandfather's tree, the tree that started everything, stands at the center like a monument. Schools bring field trips here 3 times a week. 4th graders learning about ecosystems, high schoolers doing biology projects, college students conducting wildlife surveys, eagle nests sit in the tallest pines. Fox dens hide in the underbrush, deer graze openly. I've documented over 40 bird species, 3 protected plants, migratory corridors for elk. The property is worth millions now, land developers call monthly, offering obscene amounts of money. I tell them all the same thing. It's protected in perpetuity through a conservation trust. It'll never be developed, not by me, not by my children, not by anyone, ever. The HOA. Completely transformed. Robert served 2 terms as president, then stepped down. New leadership emerged. Good people, servant leaders. The kind who understand power is responsibility, not privilege. Property values in Pine Ridge estates increased 40% over 5 years. Higher than surrounding neighborhoods. Turns out freedom and community attract buyers. Victoria, she moved away 3 years ago. Sold her house at a significant loss. Environmental violations on record, backyard in permanent shade, solar panels worthless. I heard through Robert she tried starting over in Arizona, tried joining another HOA board. They rejected her application. Googled her name, found the news stories, the court records, the documented abuse. Her reputation followed her. As it should. Last month Robert passed away, peacefully, in his sleep, at 84 years old. His funeral was packed, standing room only. The community he'd helped heal came to honor him. His daughter approached me after the service. Middle-aged woman, kind eyes, tears on her cheeks. She hugged me. "Dad told me something before he died," she whispered. "He said you taught him the most important lesson of his life." "What lesson?" "That one person standing up can change everything, that good people can still win. That courage is contagious." I felt my throat tighten. "Your father was the brave one. He testified when nobody else would. Only after you showed him it was possible." She handed me something, a folded piece of paper. "He wrote this for you, asked me to give it to you when the time was right." I opened it later, sitting under the oak tree, Robert's handwriting, shaky but clear. "Marcus, you didn't just save a tree, you saved a community. You saved me from cowardice. You proved that standing for what's right still matters in America, that tyranny, even suburban tyranny, can be defeated when someone refuses to bow. Thank you for being that someone. Your grandfather would be proud." "I know I am, Robert." I sat there crying, not ashamed, just grateful, grateful for the fight, for the victory, for the years since, for the community we'd built together. This story isn't really about trees or HOAs or revenge. It's about something deeper. It's about the truth that corrupt power only wins when good people stay silent. It's about the reality that your home, your land, your freedom, they're worth fighting for. It's about proving that one person standing their ground can inspire dozens, then hundreds, then thousands to do the same. I bring my nephew here now. He's 12, teaching him about trees, about land. About standing your ground when it matters, just like my grandfather taught me. The oak tree towers above us. 155 years old now, still strong, still standing, just like me. Just like everyone who refuses to surrender their freedom to tyrants, no matter how small those tyrants are. If this story moved you, hit that like button. And comment below. I want to hear your HOA stories, your battles, your victories, your ongoing fights. This community is stronger together. We learn from each other. We support each other. So drop a comment, share your experience. Let's build something bigger than one tree, one man, one neighborhood. Let's build a movement.